Today we continue the healing stories of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark that affirm as well God's compassion and God coming to free and to heal in Jesus, through Jesus, as well as a proclamation at the end of those healing stories, the identity of who Jesus is. Now, most often these healing stories begin with a geographic location of the context of where Jesus is in his journey throughout the Galilee and the Jerusalem region. Today is no different. The Gospel of Mark in chapter 7 begins, Jesus left the territory of Tyre and returned by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee. Now, this is a map of the region at the time of Jesus. And here is the Sea of Galilee in the north of Jerusalem. And the city of Tyre is here. Now, what's funny about the beginning of the story that would raise an alarm, if you heard this, or if someone was telling the story, is that Jesus was in the region of Tyre and went back to the Sea of Galilee via Sidon, which is further up. So the sense of why would Jesus go up and then back, in a sense, to get to the Sea of Galilee? It's just one of those things that kind of gets your attention as a biblical scholar or someone reading this that would know that region. Biblical scholars tend to think that it was the sense that of hinting at Jesus's expansion of ministry, of the community expanding into the Gentile territory, which is up there. Somehow Jesus is up there preaching and then comes back to the Sea of Galilee. That sense, word is out that Jesus is a healer, and it's expanding to that region in Tyre and Sidon. So during that journey back, in this story, people bring a deaf man to Jesus and begged him, the gospel says, begged him for Jesus to lay his hands on him. This gospel story shows God's power to heal someone who is incapable of hearing and speaking properly. The deaf man also had a speech impediment. That's what the gospel says. He had difficulty in speaking. And so then in the story goes that Jesus took him off by himself, away from the crowd. He did not want to make a spectacle of this person. And then, in a very organic, graphic way, Jesus heals this person by placing his fingers into the man's ears and then spitting and touching the man's tongue. What's key here too is that Jesus emits a groan and saying the word Ephatha. The groan is a groan of compassion, and the word Ephatha means be open, be healed through compassion. And at once the man's ears were opened and he was free from the impediment and he began to speak plainly. Jesus' compassion embraces the man's vulnerability. And in that act of speaking, that he's able to speak, Ephatha, praying, be open, groaning, compassion, the man is healed. Our fragility as human vulnerability is right at the cusp of our being. And Jesus meets that in a graphic way by touching and spitting and touching again to be healed. Ephatha is a Semitic word that means to be open, be compassionate. And by that healing, the man is restored to wholeness. And at the time of Jesus, to be restored to wholeness means he is brought back into the community. He is able to listen and to speak clearly. Now, this part I love about the gospel story is that Jesus tells him what any great marketer would do to get something out is say, now don't tell anyone. Jesus enjoins them strictly not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them not to tell, the more they told people. That's what I love about that story. Jesus was able to get the community, Jesus and the community, the disciples got the word out by saying, don't tell anyone. Jesus also reminds them that there's more to the story than just being healed. What they say is that they're amazed. They are amazed beyond all bounds. And they say, look, This man, Jesus, has done everything well, and he makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The identity of who Jesus is as healer is revealed. So this week, let us be mindful of how Christ calls us to compassion. And how does God touch us in those places where we need to be healed, where we need to see more clearly, where we may need to listen more intently, and we may need to speak more plainly to one another in acts and words and deeds of love. Be open so that we may listen. Be compassionate so that we may see and act in love. And what moves us so much that we need to tell somebody about it? What do we need to say to others in our service of love for one another? Be open, Ephatha. Be compassionate, Ephatha. Let us walk in that way of love. Amen.